2 years ago, I got a hold of the SD2SP2, a way for me to store and play all of my physical GameCube games on original hardware without needing the discs. Since then, I've been playing all of my games from a tiny little microSD card, and today, all of my physical GameCube discs are in storage, which has saved a whole lot of space in the gaming room. Whenever I get any new games, it's a simple matter of inserting the discs and backing them up on the system itself. But I've always wondered, what if the card goes duff? I'd lose all of the games I have backed up on it. It will take ages to back them all up again. The solution, of course, is to further back up the games elsewhere, like on a PC, but it's a pain getting that card out of the GameCube every time I back up a new game, what with the GameBoy Player being in the way. Well, I was exactly today years old when I discovered that the SD2SP2 has been reimagined, with a different design making it much easier to remove the SD card. So, hello fellow gamers, and should you consider one of these, or stick with the original? So, just as a recap, the SD2SP2 is a PCB that connects into the GameCube's otherwise unused SP2 port, and allows you to run homebrew or backed up games from a microSD card. I've been using one for the last couple of years now. I've got my entire library of GameCube games backed up through it, and I've never looked back. But now we've got this new model, and it looks a little different now, doesn't it? The old one was one simple PCB, whereas the new one comes as two separate parts that connect together via some pin headers. One half has the microSD port soldered on it, and the other houses the contacts that plug into the SP2 port. It's a simple matter of connecting the two together and popping it in. Now, it goes without saying, if you're considering one of these, you're gonna need the first model of GameCube, because it uses the second serial port on the bottom. The clue is kind of in the name. The second model of GameCube doesn't have this port. Now, something I did like about the old one, the first SD2SP2, was that it could be neatly hidden away under the port's existing cover. But the new model takes up the whole damn thing, introducing its own cover. But other than that, it installs the same as the original, into the same slot, though that large flat base on one of the boards makes it a pretty snug fit. At least you're not likely to install this one the wrong way around, which was a problem with the last one if you weren't paying enough attention. It doesn't look all that pretty once you have it in there either, but I suppose if you've got your GameCube sat on a shelf or in a cabinet or something, you'll never notice that ugly base anyway. In fact, you'll definitely never notice it if you have a GameBoy Player attached. I'm just glad I have the black model of the GameCube. This would look horrid if I had, say, the Spice Orange one. If you're really into your aesthetics, you're going to be out of luck with this, because right now it's only available in black. Once installed, you'll be left with a little hole on the side of your GameCube to insert your SD card, which should make removing and reinserting it a whole lot easier than before. And look, it's even spring-loaded. And in fact, while testing this, I found you can even hot swap cards if you've got games spanning multiple cards, rather than all of them on one large one. Though, maybe don't have any games running or be using the card in general while you're doing that, just in case you break anything. I can report that this works exactly the same as its predecessor. The only real advantage you have is being able to easily remove the card you're using, but the aesthetics aren't great, especially if you have a different colour of GameCube. You can't even cover it up with your existing port cover. Sadly, you're going to have to store that elsewhere and pray to God you don't break it. In my last SD2SP2 video, there were a lot of questions. Stuff like, does the GameCube need to be chipped? How do I run Swiss? How can I play the GameBoy Player without needing the disc? Well, since I'm about to go through the process of updating all of this again, I may as well walk you through how I'll be using this to play my backed up games. Hopefully, that will answer a few of your questions. In order to do that, I first need to put my GameCube back together. So first of all, we'll pop in that new SD2SP2. Presumably, I'll never have to remove this ever again. Next comes the GameBoy Player, which covers up that horrible looking panel. And then the power and the display. For the display output, I'm using the Keiko HDMI adapter plugged into the digital output. I get a lovely and clear picture on my HD TV using this, and in a little bit, I'm going to be making it even better. Next, we need to be able to boot up Swiss, which is a homebrew file explorer kind of tool for the GameCube. My way of doing this is use the SD Media Launcher from Code Junkies. It's a memory card that includes a microSD slot, so you can load up various different homebrew applications with it. It works in conjunction with the included copy of Action Replay. When you boot up the disk, it will look for an autoexec file on the Media Launcher and automatically runs it if it finds it. In my case, that boot file is going to be Swiss itself. Now, sadly, I've learned recently that these have now been discontinued. Code Junkies are still selling the last of their stock, but at time of recording, only the PAL region versions are available. So if you're in Europe, I'd definitely recommend grabbing one of these now while you can. I like using these because since the SD Media Launcher and Action Replay work together to let you run homebrew software, absolutely no hard modding is required. Now it's this I'm going to use to load up Swiss, so I went ahead and downloaded the latest version of it. I mean, mine's going to be quite a bit out of date now, and then copied it over to the SD card. I renamed it autoexec.dol so the Action Replay will pick it up. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to copy Swiss onto the card again. It can be exactly the same file as before, but it needs to be renamed igr.dol. I'll explain why in a little bit. While I've got the card in my PC, I may as well update the other homebrew I use as well, the GameBoy interface. It lets me play Game Boy games via the GameBoy Player without the need for the disc, and I get a much better picture out of it as well. Now let's put the rest of this together. The small SD card with the homebrew goes in the SD Media Launcher, the Media Launcher goes into the second memory card slot, the larger card with my games goes into the SD2SP2 in the side of the GameCube, and lastly, the Action Replay disc goes into the tray. And now, when I boot up the GameCube, it'll show me Swiss. And I didn't have to get my soldering iron out either. It even defaults to the card in the SD2SP2, so all of my games show up right away. So now that's all up and running, there are a couple of tweaks that I tend to do in order to get the most out of my setup. Firstly, in Swiss, I set the default output for all of my games to 480p. And yes, I know that's an NTSC resolution, but it scales better for modern displays. By doing this, all of my games, even ones that don't support 60Hz, look even sharper than before. Lastly, I make a small quality of life change to make using the GameCube a little easier. By changing the in-game reset global setting in Swiss to igr.dol, you might remember that from earlier, I'm able to use a shortcut to close the current game and return to Swiss at any time. I simply press B, R, Z and D-pad down without having to power cycle the console. Now those are the only global tweaks I make in Swiss, but for some games I'll also invert the C-stick. Yes, I know, I'm one of those people. This makes playing games like Super Mario Sunshine a lot easier for me. There's also the option to set up virtual cards as well, though I don't do that because I've got plenty of physical cards already. It's something I might consider in the future though. So that is how I have my GameCube set up using an SD2SP2, but this time I can easily remove the card to secure my backups. I hope all of this has answered a few of your questions. On the whole, I'd say it's worth getting this version of the SD2SP2 over the original, simply because it makes removing and reinserting the SD card a breeze. Other than that, it works exactly the same as before. However, if you don't have a black GameCube and are worried about the aesthetics of your console, you may be better off with the original. And on that note, I'm going to head off, so thanks very much for watching. What do you think of the new SD2SP2? Is it something you'd consider? And do you have any more questions about my GameCube setup? Let me know in the comments down below. And hey, while you're down there, a like is always appreciated if you enjoyed the video, and there's always that subscribe button if you want to hear more from me. Thanks again for watching, I'll catch you all next time.